The storm had been building all evening, pressing against the windows of the Merivale Museum like a restless hand. Dr. Eliza Carter watched the rain blur the glass and tried to ignore the feeling that she shouldn't have agreed to come here alone. She'd studied hauntings for 15 years, first as a skeptic, then as a reluctant believer. She had chased cold spots through abandoned hospitals and measured whispers in derelict churches, but this time felt different. The curator's voice still echoed in her head. We sealed the basement in 1972. The staff refuses to go down there. But if anyone can explain what's happening, it's you, Dr. Carter. The museum itself was small, half historical archive, half curiosity cabinet, but its basement was something else. It was once part of an older building, brick-walled and damp, a forgotten network of rooms used for storage. And somewhere down there was an exhibit that should never have been displayed. A child's porcelain doll recovered from the estate of a 19th century spiritualist. Eliza clipped her flashlight to her jacket and descended the narrow steps. Each creak of wood echoed like a heartbeat. The air below was cold enough to sting. Rows of covered displays loomed in the dark. Shapes under sheets, figures that looked too close to human. Her light caught fragments. A cracked mannequin face, a rusted mirror, a child's rocking horse. She stopped at a door marked storage, be restricted. The padlock hung broken. Someone had already been here. When she pushed the door open, the smell of dust and old perfume rolled out, faint but familiar. In the center of the room sat a glass case. Inside it, propped against faded velvet, was the doll. It wasn't what she expected. No grotesque grin, no exaggerated features, just a small, delicate face, framed by curled brown hair. One glass eye, slightly misaligned. Its dress was yellowed lace, its tiny hands folded neatly in its lap. Eliza exhaled, half laughing at her own nerves. Just an object, she murmured, setting up her recorder. Test. One temperature. AMF. Ambient sound. The needle flickered faintly. Nothing unusual. Then, faintly, something shifted. Not sound. Exactly, more like pressure in the air. She turned the recorder off. Old wiring, she told herself. Static charge. But the doll's head, she was sure, had been facing left before. Now it looked straight at her. By midnight, the storm outside had worsened. The power flickered once, twice, then held. Eliza reviewed her recordings upstairs. The museum silent except for thunder. The playback was normal until the moment she'd turned off the recorder. Then, underneath the hiss of static, came a whisper. Stay. She froze the audio, replayed it again and again. It was faint. Female, almost pleading. Suggestion, she whispered to herself. Auditory. Pareidolia. The brain finds patterns that aren't there. Still, she couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., she returned to the basement. The doll was still in its case, but the glass was fogged from the inside. Her breath caught. She wiped the glass with her sleeve. A child's handprint appeared on the inner surface. Small, perfect, impossible. Eliza, she whispered without meaning to, as though the doll might answer. Nothing. Just the ticking drip of water somewhere behind the walls. She turned to leave, but a faint click echoed behind her like porcelain tapping glass. She looked back. The doll's head tilted slightly, its eye catching the flashlight's beam. For a moment she thought she saw a movement inside the glass, like the reflection of someone standing behind her. But when she spun around, the room was empty. By morning, she was convinced she needed rest. Yet, she couldn't leave. Every logical thought told her she was overtired, projecting fear onto coincidence, but curiosity had its own gravity. She researched the doll's origins. Clara Vance, a medium from 1884 who claimed her daughter's spirit inhabited the toy. Both had died mysteriously. Clara from apparent poisoning, the daughter from pneumonia weeks earlier. Eliza wrote notes in her journal. Subject exhibits mild auditory and visual phenomena, possibly induced by environmental factors or psychological suggestion. Then she added beneath it, reluctantly, or consciousness projection. That night she dreamed of the museum dark and silent, except for the creak of a rocking chair. When se woke, she could still hear it, the slow rhythm echoing from the floor below. The museum was empty except for the storm and the low hum of the emergency lights. Dr. Eliza Carter sat in the curator's office with her laptop open, replaying the same few seconds of audio over and over. Stay. Stay. The word folded into static like breath hitting glass. She told herself it was wind, vibration, a trick of sound, compression, but each replay made her skin crawl a little more. She scribbled in her field journal, possible auditory bleed through, check humidity, wiring. Then she added a line she hated writing. If voice persists, consult Dr. Maureen O'Ree. Stress hallucinations. The rain beat harder. The fluorescent tube above her desk flickered once, twice, and went black. Silence returned thick, padded, unnatural. From somewhere below came the slow groan of wood and the soft rhythmic squeak of metal on metal. The rocking chair. Eliza grabbed her flashlight and recorder, descended the stairwell again, each step echoing like a countdown. When she reached the basement corridor, the light at the far end flickered a dull amber. The door marked Storage B was open. Inside, the rocking chair moved gently, though no draft stirred the air. The doll still sat in its glass case, but the case door hung ajar. Her breath caught. She was sure she'd locked it. She raised her camera. Basement footage. 03:22 hours, she whispered. Case disturbed. Possible break-in. The rocking slowed to stillness. Eliza edged forward. The doll's head was tilted slightly downward as though in thought. A sudden noise cracked through the room, a child's giggle, soft but sharp as a needle. Eliza spun, beams slicing across empty shelves. Nothing. Her recorder hissed with static. Beneath it, faintly, came her own name. Eliza. She dropped the device. For a moment she stood frozen, half expecting the doll to move, half certain she'd lost her mind. Okay, she whispered, forcing a shaky laugh. Sleep deprivation. That's all. She reset the lock, closed the case, and backed out slowly. But as she reached the doorway, she noticed something on the floor, small, pale fragments glinting under the light. Porcelain. She followed the trail to the base of the stairs, where the last fragment rested beside a single footprint, tiny, barefoot, pressed into the dust. The second night Eliza tried to leave. She packed her gear, drove to the nearest motel, and sat on the bed staring at her hands until dawn. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the doll's mismatched eyes opening wider. By morning, rationality returned with the pale light. She told herself she couldn't abandon the case halfway through. There had to be an explanation. When she unlocked the museum again, the air inside was warm and still. The curator hadn't returned her calls. Every floorboard creaked like someone breathing underfoot. Inetofi's, the recorder she'd dropped, was already on the desk. She hadn't brought it there. The new file on it was time-stamped an hour after she'd left. She pressed play. You can't leave yet. The voice was female, quiet, not hers, a faint lullaby. Followed on old melody she couldn't quite place. Her throat went dry. She checked the window latch. The door locks everything intact. The only key to the basement hung from her own belt. At noon, she decided to search the archive room. Maybe the previous curator's notes mentioned the doll's history. In a drawer labeled Advanced Collection, she found a cracked leather journal bound with twine. The handwriting was cramped and frantic. Clara hears her every night now. She says the child calls from inside the doll. I begged her to stop, but she swears the eyes move when she prays. Eliza turned the page. We buried the doll after Clara's death, yet by morning it was on the parlor table again. She shut the book, heart hammering. Coincidence, she muttered. Folklore, not evidence. But a faint tapping drew her attention. From the vent above the shelf came a tiny, deliberate knock 3 times, then silence. When she looked again, dust sifted down like ash. On the floor it formed 3 perfect letters. E.L. By late afternoon, the lights dimmed again. Eliza decided to test herself. Return to the basement once more. Record everything. confront the fear directly. If nothing happened under controlled observation, she could prove this was psychological. She set up 3 cameras, checked battery levels, then stood before the glass case. The doll looked exactly as before, folded hands, yellow dress, one eye slightly off-center. She placed a digital thermometer on the lid. Control reading, 63 degrees Fahrenheit, she said aloud. Then she asked, softly, "Who are you?" Nothing. Nothing. She tried again. "If you're there, show me." For several seconds, only the hum of equipment filled the air. Then, inside the glass, a fog bloomed from nowhere, condensation swirling like breath. The temperature dropped 4 degrees. Eliza's pulse hammered. "Environmental fluctuation," she whispered, though her voice trembled. A reflection formed in the glass, not her own. A woman in a dark dress stood behind her, features blurred, hands resting on the doll's shoulders. Eliza turned. The space behind her was empty. When she faced the case again, the reflection was gone, but the doll's head was tilted upward now, smiling faintly. Her flashlight flickered, then failed. Darkness swallowed the room. She stood very still, hearing the old walls breathe. Somewhere close, a whisper brushed her ear. "She's waiting for you downstairs." Eliza's hand found the rail, heart slamming against her ribs. "There is no downstairs," she muttered. "This is the basement." Yet the whisper came again, from below her feet, gentle and coaxing. "Come see it." A hollow thud sounded beneath the floorboards, like something moving in the soil. Her rational mind clawed for footing, seepage, rats. Anything but the fear rose faster than reason. She fled the room, stumbling up the stairs into the main hall where the storm raged outside the windows. The lights blinked once, twice, then steadied. She leaned against the display case of Victorian toys, chest heaving. Behind the glass, a dozen dolls stared back at her, none of them, the one from below. But in the reflection of the case, faint and pale, she could see a small figure standing on the stairs behind her. When she turned, the stairs were empty. Only the faint scent of old perfume lingered in the air. Night pressed against the museum windows like a living thing. Dr. Eliza Carter had locked every door, checked every corridor, and yet she felt watched. The emergency lights cast long yellow shafts across the floor, cutting the dark into uneven shapes that moved when she blinked. She told herself she would document one last experiment, finish the report, and walk away for good. But curiosity was the cruelest kind of gravity. She descended the stairs again, each step echoing into the hollow silence below. The glass case waited at the far end of the room, fractured by a long crack that hadn't been there before. Inside sat the doll, head upright, dress freshly bright as if laundered. Eliza whispered into the recorder. "Time, 11:42 p.m. Final observation. Environmental readings, steady. No known contaminants." The words steadied her breath. Then the lights above her began to hum, low and rhythmic, in time with her heartbeat. From somewhere unseen came the faint creak of the rocking chair. She focused on the glass. "Clara Vance," she said quietly, invoking the medium's name. "If your presence exists here, I acknowledge it, but you do not control me." The EMF meter jumped. A sharp, cold wind rippled through the room, though no vent was open. Eliza's flashlight cut across the far wall and froze. A child's shadow stood there, small shoulders, tilted head. But the beam passed through empty air. Her throat tightened. Optical illusion, she managed. Peripheral retention. Yet the shadow turned its head and smiled. The power snapped. Darkness swallowed the hall. In the pitch black, she heard the whisper of bare feet on concrete. Then the child's voice, gentle and patient. She loved the doll more than she loved me. Eliza turned toward the sound. "Who are you?" She promised I'd stay with her forever. But she left. A light flared her own flashlight, now lying on the floor. It illuminated the glass case. The doll's arms were outstretched, as if asking to be held. Eliza's breath shook. "You're not real. Your memory, trauma, electromagnetic noise. Hold me, Eliza." The whisper became a plea, overlapping with her own pulse until she could no longer tell which sound was which. She reached for the case, almost without thinking. The door swung open with a slow, sticky sound. Cold air poured out like breath from a tomb. The doll's porcelain skin was cool and smooth against her palms. For an instant, nothing happened. Then the world tilted. She was standing in a parlor lit by oil lamps. The wallpaper was Victorian, the air thick with perfume. A woman knelt beside her, a woman with Eliza's eyes, but another century's sorrow. "Clara," Eliza whispered. The woman smiled sadly. "You shouldn't have come back." The lamps flared. The walls melted into shadow. Behind Clara's shoulders stood the child's mole, silent, her eyes dark mirrors. "You left me down there." Eliza dropped the doll. It hit the floor with a brittle crack, and everything collapsed back into the basement. Her camera still ran, red light blinking. She staggered back, dizzy, breathless. The air was thick with dust and the sharp temps of ozone. The doll lay in two pieces. Inside the hollow torso, something moved, a black mist swirling like smoke inside glass. Eliza forced herself to speak, documenting a known vapor-discharged possible gas pocket. Her voice fractured into a laugh. It didn't sound like hers. From the mist came the faint echo of the lullaby again. "Sleep. Little Clara? Sleep?" The fog poured out, spiraling upward, forming the outline of a child's figure. Eliza backed against the wall. "You're not real. You're a construct, and you built me again." The mist surged forward. The camera burst in static white. When vision cleared, the doll was whole, once more sitting upright at her feet. At dawn, the museum's front door stood ajar. The curator found Eliza in the main hall, sitting on the floor with the doll cradled in her arms. Her eyes were open, unblinking. "Dr. Carter," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "It's quieter now," she said. "She's not alone anymore." They took her to St. Mary's Psychiatric Center 3 days later. Her notes filled her notebooks, meticulous, coherent, except for the last page of the final one. In a childish scrawl it read, "We're all staying together in the dark months past." The museum reopened. The basement sealed again for renovation. One afternoon, a new assistant cataloged the artifacts and found an unlabeled glass case pushed against the back wall. Inside sat a porcelain doll wearing a yellow lace dress. A small card lay beside it. That night, the guard making his rounds paused by the case. He thought he heard a woman's voice from inside, humming an old tune. He leaned closer. The glass fogged from within. Across the misted surface, a message appeared in small, deliberate letters. "Stay." The guard blinked. When he looked again, the glass was clear, but the doll's head he could have sworn was turned toward him now, smiling.